Hi, my name is Donovan, and this is your place to belong. As part of our community project, we went out into the community around the city and asked youth what was hindering them from civic engagement. After some great conversations, the barrier we landed on together was on access to information. So today I'm here with Thea Pedersen to speak on the topic of third spaces. Thank you so much for coming today. Introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Thea Pedersen. I'm very happy and excited to be here to talk about one of my most passionate subjects, which is third spaces, public spaces in particular, and just communities and how people engage with one another, which I think are probably the most common opportunities for strangers and people who know each other and families, communities to gather and to interact and to engage. And so I think it's an extremely important topic to discuss, especially in a city like Winnipeg, where we have a pretty interesting dynamic of public spaces and often are critiqued for being quite spread and sparse. So it's something that I'm passionate about, and I'm excited to talk a little bit more on.
This little fun section we like to do is a rapid fire get to know you.
Okay.
It's a maximum 1 minute. We're kind of grab bag questions. Just say the first thing that possibly comes to your mind.
Okay.
All right.
It's my favorite way to be interviewed.
Okay. Let's go. What is your biggest pet peeve?
When people step on the back of your shoes when you're walking in a crowded space.
I do that to people all the time. Oops. What is something you're currently manifesting?
I'm designing with my partner and building our home. So if that isn't manifestation and a byproduct of it, I don't know what is.
If you won $1 million tomorrow and had just 1 day to spend it, what would you spend it on?
I feel like there's a lot of pressure to do something good and selfless with it, but if I had to decide, probably invest it, and then I could make decisions with the growth later.
Objectively, the correct answer. Yeah. What was your best subject in school?
Probably social sciences, even in middle school and elementary school and high school, and art, and I think that's it.
Which is your favorite eye? Your left or your right?
My right. Yes. Definitively. I had a fun fact, corneal ulcer in my left eye at one point, and I still have a scar. I should probably favor that eye actually because it's been abused, but I have a scar in it now, so it kind of impedes my vision ever so slightly, but my right's definitely dominant.
Okay, thank you for indulging us
Yeah.
in that. So how did you get involved in this whole world of architecture and third space and public spaces? What is it that inspired you and got you so passionate about this kind of work?
Well, I actually went into the Faculty of Architecture as my second degree when I was in university, and one of the reasons why I didn't go in to begin with was I was rather intimidated. Architecture in general is a very design-focused, artistically motivated field, and not that I didn't see myself as an artist, but I definitely saw myself as a socialist, and first and foremost, and felt as though if I were to bring something to the table of architecture, it would have to be a little bit different than what is conventionally a part of that program. So long story long, I went into the Faculty of Human Ecology and I studied community development and family social sciences. And after a few years of working in the public sector, particularly in employment and income assistance, what we call it here in the province of Manitoba, which is essentially like our provincial welfare program, the idea of exploring architecture and urban design and placemaking and public space really got under my skin because it made me consider this is likely the strongest factor associated with how people are requiring and needing certain assistances and support in our community. And it can come down to like how an interior space is designed. It can be as like broad and vast as how many parks did you have access to growing up? How dense is your home setup? Like, do you live in an apartment with 12 other families? Do you live in a single family home where it's really tight houses along the street? Or is it more of a rural context where there's a whole other gamut of things involved? So needless to say, I recognized that our physical environment has a huge impact on who we are socially and in every other aspect of our psychology. And so I felt like with that just under my understanding and skill set that I was ready to step into the world of architecture, but bringing in a different kind of lens. And so after studying for 4 years in a very grueling program, I got through it and definitely took a different route than a lot of my peers in the sense that I knew that I wasn't going to be a designer likely from the beginning, but I took some components of my design degree, which were the philosophies and the theories around architecture and city building, and along with the communication tools that I learned of graphic design and public speaking and interacting with different people and engagement into my professional practice, which now is in particular in the sphere of public engagement. I work for a landscape architecture firm, not in landscape architecture, but in engagement. And it's a quite new role for me. So what I'm doing is essentially learning how to support different communication styles between technical teams like engineers and public or particular stakeholders and people who have rights to know what's happening within their community.
So yeah, you had touched a bit on your work. What kind of projects are you currently connected to?
So again, like the work that I do professionally is quite new to me. I have been in my role for 5 weeks, so I'm still learning what it is that I am doing. As everyone probably knows, it's pretty daunting and there's a lot of information when you start a new job. But overall, like what attracted me to it was, again, communicating with communities about what's happening in places that are really important to them. And what I had done leading up to that work was actually working in a pretty prominent public space here in Winnipeg, which I'm sure you all know of as the Forks. That was a very rewarding position to be in communications and marketing for such an important public space in our city, if not the most important public space, I think, in our province, and a pretty strong precedent for how public spaces should be constructed and managed. So I would say that my work at the Forks and my involvement there really led me more into engagement and better understanding how people want to see their spaces and how they have a right to influence what happens there. I also support a small not-for-profit organization who I think actually has charity status now, don't quote me on that, but Storefront Manitoba, which is an organization that is dedicated to supporting architecture and awareness around architecture and public spaces and design in our province. They're pretty well known for some of the projects that they undertake, like their massive annual fundraiser, which is Table for 1200, Cool Gardens, which is very similar to, if you know, warming huts along the Nestaway River Trail. Cool Gardens is sort of like a summer version of that, so soliciting design ideas from local designers and artists and architects all around the world and building those to keep people cool, but also to inspire ideas around design and community and connection. So I've been doing work with Storefront for a few years now, and I always look for opportunities to talk about design and get excited about design in our community and elsewhere. So yeah.
Not to get too technical, but mind kind of taking us, what does your work, either with Storefront or through your career, kind of look like in the day-to-day?
In the day-to-day, right now at work, I'm doing a lot of reading and learning and trying to figure out how things come together, literally. a major component of my work is translating, and before translating, understanding and interpreting for myself pretty technical information and making it so other people who are as new to this subject as I was can understand what it is that's going to be coming to their communities. So anything from dams, landfills, and feasibility studies that may be important to particularly rural communities, but communities throughout our province and actually throughout our country. But again, often working with smaller communities and smaller municipalities and communicating what it is that needs to be constructed in their home and how that will be communicated, how that will be understood, and soliciting feedback from people and learning what's important to them. And if I were to go into more of the work that I've done in the past at the Forks, it was mainly around communicating public-facing activities and stories that were exciting to people and important to those that are visiting the space. So if it was something managerial that the Forks was trying to implement or support, it was communicating sort of nuanced ideas like that, and then programmatically looking at different things that are offered in a public space, from communicating what public artists are creating or what kind of specials tenants are offering, what kind of just unique opportunities the place has to offer, and telling people about that. So, yeah.
Is there anything that's surprised you in getting to see the public's reaction during these communications and solicitation?
Yes and no. I think that the content that would have surprised me would be how people use social media as a tool to voice concerns and excitement around different things that are happening in a public space that they feel ownership and entitlement to. And definitely not surprised with the lack of information that's available for people to understand what a public space is, what funding goes in towards it, and how much they actually have at stake. So actually, the Forks is a really unique model of third space and public space because it isn't publicly funded. Our tax dollars do not go to support the free initiatives that are offered. Their funding comes from revenue that is generated from people visiting and spending money there. So it's a really unique model for a public space, similar to a mall, in the sense that when you spend money at a mall, that money the money that you spend at a particular store, a portion of that goes towards the rent that they pay to have the structure that has the washrooms, that has the parking lot, that has all of the amenities that you can enjoy for free. And what makes the Forks unique to that is that there's actually like an extension of that free offering, and that comes in the form of something that's often consumable, if that's an experience or if that's actually something that you go away with face paint or have learning a new dance routine or meeting a new friend. There's a lot of tangible initiatives that the Forks puts forward that are free to the public because of their redistribution of revenue and resources. I think that that's something that the community at large doesn't necessarily know very much about, and I think that that's sort of where I am surprised, but also understand that it's a complicated and unique process of public space, and people have to have an appetite to understand that type of information. And often when you're consuming information on social media, it's, as I'm guilty of it too, it's hard to get the whole story when you just see something and you have your own very unique siloed interaction with that space or that idea, and you have an opinion on it. So it's sort of a full circle response.
Simple question, I'm sure you can answer in very few words. What is a third space?
Third spaces are places that we spend time, whether we choose to or not, outside of our home or outside of our work/school. They're often things like parks and libraries and cafes, public markets, and just places that you either spend money or don't, but it's, again, an extension of your home and your workplace. It's a spot that we go to gather and to connect and to play. And they're essentially destinations, I feel like, between the places where we have to be, such as home and work, and yeah.
So why are third spaces so important?
Well, third spaces are important because they give us familiarity within our own city. They are places where community can happen organically. They're special and unique in-between spaces and services that make urban living actually quite special. I like to call it the predictably unpredictable. They're enriching, they bring color, entertainment, and engagement into our lives. So public spaces really are a very enriching opportunity to find out more about where you live, and also to just have space away from the places that we're obligated to be a part of 19 hours a day.
What are some of the positive benefits we see from third spaces?
So I think that third spaces and public spaces in particular have a strong benefit both for people as an individual and then also for our cities. For people, they give us the freedom to connect and to share. There's this, I don't know, half on, half off switch that you can kind of flirt with when you're in a public space. Like when you're at home, it's like you can just at the very core be yourself and not worry about what anyone else is thinking, and just only be concerned about the things that you need to do for your own body and to survive. And then when you're at work, you're like performing and you're producing, and in lots of cases you're quite vulnerable, concerned, also hopefully quite fulfilled, but it's a strong extreme or spectrum, if you will. And I feel like third spaces are kind of this like unique middle ground, which almost they should be called second spaces if you look at it in a chronological way. But they're the ones where we have kind of given, or spaces where we've given ourselves permission to be engaged with and to be communicated to, whereas at home it's very private and it's actually considered rude to cold call people and to solicit anything really at someone's home and knock on their door after hours. But when you enter a public space, you're giving the public that are also there permission to communicate with you. And if that's just a friendly nod and a smile, or if that's what kind of coffee did you order, or where did you get that shirt, or can I have $5? So I think that the idea of public spaces being the last place that we would visit, I feel like they're actually, again, the in-between. So it's the places that you also use from being at home and a part of your path going to work. But they also can be quite inspiring. They're opportunities for us to learn more about, again, our city, and then the culture that's involved in the makeup of our city, if that's through different products that are offered, or sounds that we experience through music that's being played in a public space, or the artwork that could be either in a structural form or in a mural. They really like open our minds and get us thinking about things that are outside of our own day-to-day. And that's why they're good for people, but I think that they're really good for cities because of the obvious reasons of providing a space for economic activity, ecological opportunities in parks and outdoor spaces. Like you've got birds and bees and flora and fauna and people doing people things everywhere. There's also a lot of opportunity for people to share knowledge in public spaces and communicate. Once again, you've really opened yourself up to being your on switch is tuned in. They're places for social support, so asking for money and asking for help and demonstrating that you need help is something that's very much allowed and in some ways welcomed in public spaces. But to me, one of the most important things about them and how they contribute to society and to cities in particular is how we perceive them with respect to tourism and civic pride. And again, especially in a place like Winnipeg, where we're very spread out, and on the surface we don't have that many cool offerings in between the large spaces that you're either driving 25 minutes through or taking 3 bus transfers to get to. But when we know about these public spaces, especially in Winnipeg, we get really excited about them and we want to celebrate them and we want to wear them with pride. And I think that that's a testament of how important they are, because without them, we don't have a lot of civil credibility. So yeah, I think they're really, really important for places that are so uniquely spread out, as much as they are for places as dense as New York and Paris and Tokyo that probably have the highest rate of third spaces of any big metropolis. Because they're people living on top of each other, they need a place to go that's not home, because home is a pretty small square footage compared to what we're dealing with here. So
It's very interesting, a lot of what you're saying about, especially the context of Pride that just happened, where you see people in these third spaces who are they're more vulnerable than they are at home in some of these times, and they have to go out and be very vulnerable and very open in public, and it's
that's a good point, because it's like, not only are you going to be inspired, but you're also going to public spaces to inspire and to advocate, to protest, and to celebrate. And so it's not just this take. They're not there for us to take, they're there for us to give as well.
So what are some important characteristics of third spaces that help them fulfill those roles?
There's different systems that we have in our community, and there's like the micro system that we have at home, and the really basic needs that you need from a home, including food and water and a bathroom and shelter and comfort, love. But if you pull those things back and kind of expand them a bit, there's still common themes that live within public spaces as well. And I think that you can kind of apply at least like the bottom level of hierarchy of needs in all of the spaces that we engage with. So again, it's like really obvious where those come into play in your home and how you sustain yourself, but it's a little less obvious as to how important they are to the spaces that we share with other people. So just having something as simple as a spot to rest and a spot to sit makes room for places to share and places to perform and to relax. It's also really important to have opportunities to consume, and that doesn't just mean, although it is really nice to have places to buy food and to buy souvenirs and takeaways and products, but knowledge, and consuming knowledge doesn't always have to come at a cost. And then there's the less sexy parts that I think can often be overlooked in public spaces, but are the most important, if anything, especially for more vulnerable sectors of our population. And those things include just bathrooms and shelter and garbage cans and air conditioning in some instances and warmth in others. And then there's the less tangible aspects that are really important characteristics, and those include things like music and art and the architectural details that are making these public spaces come to fruition. And one other thing that I think is becoming a little bit more, thank goodness, on the forefront of planning public spaces is accessibility, both physically, geographically. Thank goodness in Winnipeg we have them, again, far too spread out, but also financially. Like, there are more places that people can visit for free, and that's where I really like to distinguish between third spaces and public spaces, because third spaces are when we're going through the first is my home, the second place I spend the most amount of time is work or school, depending on where you are in your life, and the third space is it's my mom's if I don't live at home, or it's my lake, or it's my gym. But those aren't inclusive places that everybody can enjoy together, and those places are important for you as an individual, but they also might be less important if you actually had a public space to visit and go and see your mom, or not spend $40 on a gas tank to go to the lake, and many more things that come along with those types of commitments, and just allow us to connect with other people in a way that we can't always do in our own definitions of third spaces. So yeah, I think that public spaces in particular need to be extremely accessible for everybody, and that's people with mobility challenges and differences, and people with financial differences and setbacks and different types of people who either speak the language in which the third space is offered in as a first language or an additional language, or have a different way of conducting themselves. Like, we all just need to be accepted and feel like we belong in a space that we share together.
So, considering some of our societal shifts between in-person relations to interacting much more on social media and such, how can we build third spaces that encourage and facilitate, actively work towards strangers connecting to one another?
Well, I think that a lot of that comes into play with respect to programming. So avoiding the inclusion of anti-engaging connection, like QR codes and digital access, albeit I think that those things are really communicating in public spaces quite a bit easier and sharing information. But they're also pretty limiting and exclusionary, if you will. And they also make it so that we are more tied to our phones. Like, I don't know how many restaurants you've been to after the pandemic that still have the QR code that you have to scan when you go to the table to meet a friend. And it just feels so awkward because the first thing I do when I meet somebody in a cafe or a public space is I put my phone away and I'm with them. And if I'm encouraged to take my phone out, it's just like one extra level of separation from the person that I'm engaging with. And that person that you're engaging with and that you've come to meet is another level of separation from the rest of the public that are also enjoying that space. You can't enforce a no phone or a no screen policy in any public space or any free space, but you can definitely dissuade and discourage people from using them by just not encouraging them. And I think just spaces that are flexible and engaging enough for us to inspire conversation. It's funny, like, one of the most quiet public spaces or third spaces that I can consider are places that have the most inspiration naturally embedded in them, like an art museum or a public library, where we're not encouraged to communicate, but there's so much stimulus there for us to talk about and to engage with other people upon. So maybe finding more loud and vibrant spaces to put things like public art and knowledge opportunities that just naturally inspire us to share, whether we're an introverted person by nature or extroverted. We're all excited to communicate and hear from other people.
So, how can we make these third and public spaces more important in our life when it seems like first and second take up so much of our time?
It's an important question because it's not really something, I guess, to some extent we can choose, and in others we can't, and it's a societal shift that needs to change. It's about math. Like, how much time do we have in a day? How much time do we need to spend at home? How much time are we required to spend at work, and what's left over? And the first part of that equation is how much time do we need to spend at home? And in a lot of ways, that's can be answered with a lifestyle change, and that's something that is often under control. So what kind of housing types do we subscribe to? Are we open to having multifamily homes? If that's something that is not going to work for a particular family or individual, are there ways that we can explore density? And that doesn't even have to be within apartment or condo living. That can still be in single family homes, but just living in places that have more houses on a block, and a block being less than 500 meters of space. Like, just really considering density in creative ways. And probably the biggest factor and the ultimate factor is our work-life balance really sucks. Like, we try to integrate this 4-day work week and make it a great selling feature, but we're always adding more time to the other days that we're there. And that, in the end, doesn't really give us more time to explore a third space or other hobbies or interests or things that are outside of our work life. Like, a 37 or 40-hour work week is the same if you just put 10 hours in 4 days or 8 hours in 5 days. Like it's a bit of a silly mind game that we've kind of convinced ourselves is okay. So ultimately, I think it's about lifestyle choices. And yeah, again, like when you look at places that have more density, there's a higher need to have public spaces because there's more need to have more space that is an extension of your home. So when you're living in a place that's under 500 square feet and you don't have a spot to host your family for dinner, picnics in a public park are maybe going to be one of your only options. And if your public park requires you to drive for 25 minutes to get to it, it's not really a feasible option, and therefore it's limiting your engagement with other people, and it's a deterrent to exploring public spaces. And so that's why I think that there's places like New York and London and Paris and Tokyo and all these really great urban centers that just have an exorbitant amount of park spaces and green spaces and people engaging and kids playing and sounds from people just enjoying themselves in an urban environment. And it's also just like what makes it so attractive to people like us who are used to being in a community that's quite far spread and far reaching. But we also have the infrastructure to facilitate our far reachingness. Like we have over 2,000 square feet of home for a 2-person family. Is just like, how do you have a home that you don't even visit certain rooms of it for more than a day at a time? It's just like unused space that could actually be public space. So we have no shortage of square footage to play with. We just have to reallocate our ways of thinking and our resources and really commit to a new balance between the types of spaces we use and the amount of time that we spend within them.
I do find it interesting. A lot of communities that don't necessarily have these spaces and as a whole oppose them, you're still seeing them, the individuals living there coming downtown because they love all these parks, they love all these third spaces, but they don't and often oppose having them in their own neighborhoods or just live in a neighborhood that is not conducive to those at all.
But both of those, I think, are mindset changes. And like those people enjoy downtown and like highly dense public spaces because that's all, as you said, that's all that's available to them, and not really advocating and exploring the need to have public spaces in their own backyard. And I think if people were to really understand that extra 20 minutes in the car both ways is taking away from the engaging opportunities that you have to explore public spaces and all the things that you love about them. And again, like really turning third spaces on its head a bit and treating it as like they're also just the networks and the places that we explore naturally to connect from point A to point B. And if we can enhance those in-between spaces with opportunities to engage and opportunities to connect, it turns those types of third space that are networks into exciting, engaging public spaces that we're less likely to drive through and more likely to sit back and enjoy. But yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think at the end of the day, it's about really socializing the idea of your home time and the whatever your personal definition of the proximity around your home is, your own private time and space, and those that are intersecting with that space on your own sidewalk that's in front of your house, or the street that they're driving to work down that also is in front of your home. You're all there for a very different reason, and you're all there likely in a hurry. Like you're leaving home to go to work or to pick up the kids, or you're driving to work and racing down a residential street, or you're running to catch the bus and you're running down a neighborhood block. And those are all opportunities for people to intersect and to connect. But again, like those are spaces that influence us to rush and to move quickly. Whereas if we're all in a public space, again, we've given everyone else around us the okay to interact and the okay to know that we're not in a hurry and we're not looking forward to leaving.
What are some barriers you see to third spaces being established and maintained over time?
So barriers to third spaces being established, a major component of that is the cost, especially for those like parks and free spaces that don't generate revenue. And proving the benefit and the social benefit and the emotional benefit is kind of a tough merit to, or metric, I should say, to demonstrate, and one to prove that that's where public funding should be sunken into. And again, I think it comes back to lifestyle, the way that the city is designed so that we feel that there's actually a need for public spaces. In communities where people have a lot of space and privacy, they're not necessarily looking at advocating for more of that. Yeah, again, like if we don't have something, we don't really recognize the need for it. And if we don't recognize the need for it, we're not going to explore for it. So without like a baseline, without a baseline of what it is to have an important and a thriving public space as a precedent, it's kind of hard to push to create good ones in our city. I think that public spaces and the services that come along with public spaces, such as libraries and community centers and recreation facilities, are often a nice to have or an extra rather than an integral part of our civil infrastructure. Again, because those intangible social benefits and emotional benefits and things that are a little less directly related to are harder to measure and thus harder to advocate for.
On the flip side of that, how can we, as people who use these spaces, support third spaces in our communities and their organizers?
Use them and explore them. And yeah, it can be something as simple as just like having a fun exercise with yourself of I'm going to visit every city-owned park in Winnipeg, or I'm going to go to a different market every weekend this summer and support local. And maybe it's something as simple as just like changing the way that you get there. If you're somebody who often drives to these types of spaces or to work, try a different mode of transportation that makes you slow down and makes you observe other pockets and, I guess, more organically formed public spaces. That it could just be something that wasn't intended to be a gathering opportunity, like some rail tracks that are, albeit like within safe distance of trains and whatnot, but those are usually void open public spaces that are full of berms and wildlife and wildflowers and sunshine and still like urban elements like cars honking and birds flying around you at an uncomfortable height. And yeah, if you take the time to explore things in a different way, you often see them in a different way too. Yeah, and I don't want to drive too much around social media because I feel like there is no shortage of information on social media, but it is a great place to learn about what people are doing and where they're doing it. And then like kind of investigating a little bit further and like seeing who's tagged and seeing what kind of programmers are involved in certain events and activities and what relationships you can form yourself to be more informed about what's happening.
Just to finish this off, just a little light one, what are some of your favorite third spaces and public spaces around the city?
Definitely love the Forks. I feel like that's probably one of my favorite public spaces that I've ever visited in my life because of the diversity of offerings and the opportunities that exist there, and the fact that it is also just like this core hub within so many ways of circulating the city, and it really is just like the cornerstone of how we get places and how we get from different areas of Winnipeg. Another one that I did often overlook is when it was first built was the Leaf at Assiniboine Park until this winter, after a couple of extremely cold, grueling, dark days, and my partner suggested that we go and visit the Leaf just for an afternoon, and I'm totally sold on having a membership for next winter, just like to be in a space that you feel comfortable being sleeveless and seeing vegetation again and hearing birds and maybe seeing an ant or two in a weird, welcomed way is super, super refreshing on a winter day. But then I really like small public parks. I actually got married in a public park, so it makes one of them really important to me, which is Munson. And one of the reasons why we chose that when we decided to have a wedding was like Munson Park is such an interesting intersection of so many different people. It's like very urban, but also very like connected to a lot of affluence, and then connected to a lot of different people who are just kind of walking through and going to work and commuting and trying new things. And it's on the river, it's small, there's amazing gardens there. But first and foremost, I think is just like the role that it played for me during the pandemic. I lived in West Broadway and visited that park so often because it was one of the only places where I could see people. And I have one more public space that I really, really love. And I don't even know if this one's a public space, but for me it's become a third space, and it's definitely a third and a second place for a lot of folks, is the track at Gordon Bell High School. It's just such a interesting, weird pocket of green that brings so many different people together. You've got like a family picnicking on a hill. You've got a bunch of young new Canadians who are playing soccer on one side, and then you've got a couple of people doing some kind of fashion show lip syncing thing on the other side of the field. Well, someone like me is running around watching all of this, and another person is taking the bus, and someone's biking by, and someone's honking their horn, and kids are leaving school, and it's just like, how are there so many people doing so many different things, oblivious to one another in the most beautiful way in this one spot? And so I think that space is like a very special, unique opportunity, and something that we can often build little micro park ideas off of and get inspiration from.
So, Winnipeg is a unique and vibrant place full of odd facts and absurdist concepts. To end our podcast, we want to ask you, what is the weirdest, wackest, or most wonderful thing you've ever experienced in Winnipeg?
We're just an annoying, weird, wacky thing is that I feel like maybe this time of year, like May to June, particularly early June, it's weird that it's like the only time that we can look forward to where we don't have any elements to sort of throw off our game. Like, we don't have any cankerworms yet, knock on wood, that they might not come. We don't have mosquitoes. The wasps aren't really a thing quite yet. And then what is it that comes in the fall? I think it is just the wasps and maybe like an abundance of ladybugs. And maybe you can tell that I'm actually like have a high phobia of bugs and critters and small things. But yeah, it is like a very unique time to not dread going outside and to definitely celebrate going to your local park or public space and enjoy outdoors, because we can with so many liberties right now. And we shouldn't take it for granted, because we know that fish fly or worm or mosquito or some kind of flesh-eating bug is going to come out and get us at some point this summer. So, yeah.
For our outro, just want to offer the platform if you have any closing words.
Yeah, I think just explore things for yourself and share it with somebody else. And that doesn't mean on social media, but as you're walking away from a park, go tell someone else that they should visit it and why. But, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was very exciting to be asked to be a part of this, so I really appreciate it and feel very well listened to, and it was a great conversation, so thank you.